Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. I welcome you all to my first lecture regarding neuroanatomy. Now, how we classify the nervous system. We classify the nervous system number one, functional. Or physiological. Classification. And number two, gross anatomical. And embryological classification. Now, functionally, physiologically, these are the types. Number one, somatic nervous system. Number two, autonomic nervous system. And number three, enteric nervous system. So this is how we classify the nervous system according to functions and physiological aspects. Now we will discuss the gross anatomical and embryological types of nervous system. Now, nervous system. We classify into two major parts, that is central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. Now, central nervous system. Why it is known as central nervous system? We know that in the center of the body or axis of the body there is skull and vertebral column. Inside the skull is cranial cavity and the vertebral canal occupy the vertebral column. So the cranial cavity and the vertebral column lie in the center. The cranial cavity is occupied by brain and the vertebral canal is occupied by spinal cord. So because brain and spinal cord lie in the center, this is one reason it is classified as central nervous system. And the other reason for it is because various centers are located in the brain. This is why it is labeled as central nervous system. Then from the brain and the spinal cord, nerves arise, and these nerves are distributed peripherally to the head and neck, to the trunk, to the upper and lower limb. So because these nerves are distributed peripherally, therefore it is classified as peripheral nervous system. Now the central nervous system is further divided into various parts. It is brain and spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord. Brain is also known as encephalon. The spinal cord is also known as medulla spinalis. So do not confuse with medulla oblongata. It is known as medulla spinalis. The brain or encephalon further comprise of different parts. This is forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Forebrain is also known as prosencephalon. Midbrain is also known as mesencephalon. While hindbrain is also known as rhinencephalon. This part is also embryological classification. You know, the neural tube is divided into vesicles. This is the cephalic part of the neural tube divided into vesicles. So this is prosencephalon. This is mesencephalon. And this is a rhinencephalon. Rest of the neural tube becomes the spinal cord. So prosencephalon, mesencephalon, and rhinencephalon, this is also embryological classification. Forebrain or prosencephalon further comprise of different parts. Telencephalon, rhinencephalon, Diencephalon. Prosencephalon further divided into telencephalon, rhinencephalon and diencephalon. Now telencephalon is cerebrum. And the cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres, right cerebral hemisphere and left cerebral hemisphere. These two cerebral hemispheres are interconnected by various structures, but one of the major structures is known as corpus callosum. This was telencephalon. Then rhinencephalon, this is the part of the brain which is concerned with sense of smell, and it comprises of various parts which we will discuss later on in detail. Then next part is the diencephalon, which further classified into two major parts, thalamus cephalon and hypothalamus. Thalamus is further divided into different parts, that is epithalamus, thalamus and metathalamus. Thalamus further divided into epithalamus, thalamus and metathalamus. Epithalamus comprises of habenular commissure, and habenular nucleus. And epiphysis is also known as spinal body. And posterior commissure. Then the next part of the telencephalon is the thalamus. And next part is the metathalamus. Now metathalamus further comprises of two elevations, known as lateral geniculate body and medial geniculate body. So lateral and medial geniculate bodies are collectively known as the metathalamus. In this way, Diencephalon is classified into telencephalon and hypothalamus. Telencephalon is further classified into three major parts: epithalamus, thalamus, and metathalamus. Epithalamus comprises of habenular commissure and habenular nucleus. Then epiphysis, which is also known as spinal body, and then posterior commissure. You know, there are two neuroendocrine glands which are attached to the brain, that is pineal body and pituitary. Pineal body is also known as epiphysis, while pituitary gland is called hypophysis. So this is how we divide the forebrain or prosencephalon, divide and redivide into various parts. Then there is midbrain or mesencephalon. There is no further division of mesencephalon. Next is the hindbrain or rhinencephalon. Hindbrain or rhinencephalon. This is further classified into three major parts, that is metencephalon. Metencephalon is also known as pons. Then rhinencephalon. Rhinencephalon is also known as medulla oblongata. And the third major part of the hindbrain is cerebellum. Now, just like cerebrum was divided into right cerebral hemisphere and left cerebral hemisphere, cerebellum can also be divided into two hemispheres, that is right cerebellar hemisphere and left cerebellar hemisphere. These two cerebellar hemispheres in the midline are connected by a worm-like structure known as the worms. Now this is how we divide the brain or encephalon into different types and subtypes. Then next to it is the spinal cord or medulla spinalis. Spinal cord, according to different regions, we divide into different sections, different segments. Spinal cord is divided into various segments. In the cervical region is the cervical part of the spinal cord, divided into cervical segments. Then in the thoracic region are thoracic segments. Then lumbar region, there are lumbar segments. In the sacral region, there are sacral segments. And then in the coccygeal region, coccygeal segment. These were the types and subtypes of central nervous system, that is the brain and spinal cord. Now the peripheral nervous system comprises of nerves which are distributed to various parts of the body. Now I have to rub this various space to describe the peripheral nervous system. Now the peripheral nervous system. It comprises of nerves only. Now these nerves are divided by two methods. Number one, cranial nerves. And number two, spinal nerves. Now cranial nerves are those which arise from brain. And spinal nerves are those which arise from spinal cord. So there are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Which arise from the brain, and there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves which arise from the spinal cord. So all these nerves, they are running in the peripheral parts, therefore they are grouped as peripheral nervous system. Now the second part of the peripheral nervous system are ganglia. These are small, rounded or oval collections of neurons outside the brain and spinal cord. Now these ganglia also we classify into two varieties: spinal ganglia and autonomic ganglia. Autonomic ganglia, because autonomic nervous system comprises of sympathetic and parasympathetic, therefore we have sympathetic ganglia. And parasympathetic ganglia. So peripheral nervous system is either in the form of nerves or in the form of ganglia. Nerves we can classify those arising from brain are known as cranial nerves. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. And those which arise from the spinal cord, there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. The ganglia are further of two types: spinal ganglia and autonomic ganglia, which are sympathetic and parasympathetic. Now there is another way of classification of these nerves also. That is, number one, somatic nerves. And number two, autonomic nerves. Autonomic, also known as splanchnic nerves. Those nerves which supply the soma, body parts, called somatic nerves. And those which are involuntary are grouped as autonomic or splanchnic nerves. The autonomic or splanchnic nerves are sympathetic and parasympathetic. The sympathetic nerves, they are thoracolumbar in origin. That is, they arise from all thoracic segments of the spinal cord and upper 2 or 3 lumbar segments of the spinal cord. And parasympathetic is craniosacral in origin. That is, some of the parasympathetic nerves originate from the brain. There are 4 pairs of cranial nerves which originate from the brain. And then from sacral segment, sacral 2, 3, 4 segments of the spinal cord, the nerves rise. So this is how we classify the nervous system. Now, I will just summarize to show most of these parts in diagram. Now, if you draw a lateral view of the brain and spinal cord, this is lateral view of the brain and spinal cord. This is cerebrum. We have right cerebral hemisphere and left. So because this is lateral view, therefore you can see only one cerebral hemisphere. The other is on the other side. Next is the smallest part of the brain. That is midbrain or mesencephalon. Below the midbrain is the pons. Still below the pons is the medulla oblongata. Behind the pons and upper part of the medulla oblongata is cerebellum. So this is lateral view of brain and spinal cord. So prosencephalon comprised of cerebrum, telencephalon, diencephalon. But externally we can see only the cerebrum, and rest of the forebrain we can only say we can see when we section the brain. Then we will be able to see different parts of the forebrain. Then this is mesencephalon or midbrain. It is not further divided. Then pons. Below the pons is medulla oblongata, and behind the pons and upper part of the medulla oblongata is cerebellum. And from the lower end of the medulla oblongata, spinal cord continue to descend. Now if we draw the front view of the brain and spinal cord, now you can see front view of the cerebrum, which is divided into right cerebral hemisphere and left cerebral hemisphere. These two hemispheres are interconnected in the middle by various structures. And one of the major structures is corpus callosum. Then next to cerebrum, this is front view of the midbrain or mesencephalon. Below the mesencephalon is the pons. Below the pons is medulla oblongata, front view of the. This is medulla oblongata. And below the medulla oblongata, spinal cord. So this is front view of the brain and spinal cord, showing some of the parts. Now there is another part of the brain that's called brain stem. Now what is brain stem? It comprises of midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. parts, midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata are collectively known as the brain stem. Now we can understand it by this diagram. For example, this is a flower. And this is a leaf. Now both these are attached to a stem. So the flower here represents the cerebrum and the leaf is the cerebellum. Now the cerebrum and cerebellum, they are attached to the brain stem, which comprise of midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. These three parts are collectively known as the brain stem. So with this, we classify the nervous system into various parts, gross anatomically and also neurologically. In the brain specimen or model, externally we can see some of the parts, but the other parts we can only see when we cut a section of the brain and spinal cord, and still some parts they require special staining. Then we will be able to see those different parts. So in this lecture we finished with the classification of nervous system into different parts. We will discuss first the external features of the brain and spinal cord. After finishing with the external features, then we will switch on internal features. So external features, we will start in descending order, that is from cerebrum downward to the spinal cord. And then we will start internal features, that also will start with the cerebrum. Then we will discuss the midbrain, pons, cerebellum, medulla oblongata, and spinal cord. In most of the books of the anatomy, they start the neuroanatomy in ascending order, that is, they start with the spinal cord, medulla oblongata, pons, etc. But I will describe these features of these parts in descending order, that is from cerebrum down to the spinal cord, both external features and internal features. Thank you very much.